Reading through the Bible in 1 year, July 4th, Joshua chapter 6, verses 6 through 27, Psalms 135 through 136, Isaiah 66, and Matthew chapter 14. So Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said to them, "Carry the ark of the covenant, and let the 7 priests carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of Yahweh." Then he said to the people, "Go forward and march around the city, and let the armed men go on before the ark of Yahweh." And it happened that when Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before Yahweh passed on forward and blew the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of Yahweh came after them. And the armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard came after the ark, while they continued to blow the trumpets. But Joshua commanded the people, saying, "You shall not shout, nor let your voice be heard, nor let a word proceed out of your mouth, until the day I tell you, shout. Then you shall shout." So he had the ark of Yahweh taken around the city, circling it once, until they came into the camp, and spent the night in the camp. Then Joshua arose early in the morning, and the priests carried the ark of Yahweh. And the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of Yahweh, went on continually and blew the trumpets. And the armed men went before them, and the rear guard came after the ark of Yahweh. And they continued to blow the trumpets. Thus, the second day, they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. And so they did for 6 days. Then it happened that on the 7th day, they rose. I want to make sure I don't lose the note here. There we go. Then it happened on the 7th day. How am I losing my spot here? I love Logos, I do, but if you start scrolling on one section or another, sometimes it'll jump forward and backward quite a bit. So let's continue on. There we go, verse 15. Then it happened that on the 7th day they rose early at the break of dawn and marched around the city in the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they marched around the city, they'd already walked around it 7 times. Now they walk around it 7 times at once. Only on that day they marched around the city 7 times. That's what I'm trying to say. Continuing with verse 16 here. Now it happened that on the 7th time the priest blew the trumpets. And Joshua said to the people, "Shout, for Yahweh has given you the city. And the city shall be devoted to destruction. It and all that is in it belongs to Yahweh. Only Rahab the harlot and all who are with her in the house shall live, because she hid the messengers whom we sent. But as for you, only keep yourselves from the things devoted to destruction, lest, as you are devoting them to destruction, you also take some of the things devoted to destruction and make the camp of Israel devoted to destruction and bring trouble on it. But all the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron are holy to Yahweh. They shall go into the treasury of Yahweh." So the people shouted, and the priests blew the trumpets. And when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, the people shouted with a great shout, and the wall fell down beneath itself, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight ahead, and they took the city. And they devoted to destruction everything in the city, both man and woman, young and old, ox and sheep and donkey, with the edge of the sword. Now, to the 2 men who had spied out the land, Joshua said, "Go into the harlot's house, and bring the woman and all she has out of there, as you have sworn to her." So the young men who were spies went in and brought out Rahab and her father and her mother and her brothers and all she had. They also brought out all of her relatives and placed them outside the camp of Israel. But they burned the city with fire and all that was in it. Only the silver and the gold and articles of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the house of Yahweh. However, Rahab the harlot and her father's household and all she had Joshua preserved alive. And she had lived, and she has lived in the midst of Israel to this day. For she hid the messengers whom Joshua had sent to spy out Jericho. Then Joshua made them swear an oath at that time, saying, Cursed before Yahweh is the man who rises up and builds this city, Jericho. With the loss of his firstborn he shall lay its foundation, and with the loss of his youngest son he shall set up its gates. So Yahweh was with Joshua, and the report about him was in all the land. Now, Psalms 135 through 136. Praise Yah. Praise the name of Yahweh. Praise him, O slaves of Yahweh, in the courts of the house of our God. Praise Yah, for Yahweh is good. Sing praises to his name, for it is lovely. For Yah has chosen Jacob for himself, Israel for his treasured possession. For I know that Yahweh is great, and that our Lord is greater than all gods. Whatever Yahweh pleases, he does, in heaven and on earth, in the seas and in all deeps. The one who causes the clouds to ascend from the end of the earth, who makes lightnings for the rain, who brings forth the wind from his storehouses. He struck the firstborn of Egypt, from man to beast. He sent signs and wonders in your midst, O Egypt. Amongst Pharaoh and all his slaves. He struck mighty nations and slew mighty kings, Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan, and all the kingdoms of Canaan. He gave their land as an inheritance to Israel, his people. O Yahweh, your name is everlasting. O Yahweh, your remembrance is from generation to generation. For Yahweh will render justice for his people, and will give comfort to his slaves. The idols of the nations are silver and gold, the work of man's hands. They have mouths, but they do not speak. They have eyes, but they do not see. They have ears, but they do not hear. Surely there is not any breath in their mouths. Those who make them will be like them, all who trust in them. O house of Israel, bless Yahweh. O house of Aaron, bless Yahweh. O house of Levi, bless Yahweh. You who fear Yahweh, bless Yahweh. Blessed be Yahweh from Zion, who dwells in Jerusalem. Praise Yah. Psalm 136. Give thanks to Yahweh, for he is good. His loving kindness endures forever. Give thanks to the God of gods, for his loving kindness endures forever. Give thanks to the Lord of lords, for his loving kindness endures forever. This is typically one that would be read with a reader and a response. So one would say, give thanks to Yahweh for he is good, and the congregation would respond, for his loving kindness endures forever. Continuing in verse 4, to him who alone does great wonders, for his loving kindness endures forever. To him who made the heavens with skill, for his loving kindness endures forever. To him who spread out the heaven above the waters, for his loving kindness endures forever. To him who made the great lights, for his loving kindness endures forever. His sun to rule by day, his loving kindness endures forever. And his moon, and the moon and stars to rule by night, for his loving kindness endures forever. To him who struck the Egyptians through their firstborn, for his loving kindness endures forever. Then brought Israel out from their midst, for his loving kindness endures forever. With a strong hand and an outstretched arm, for his loving kindness endures forever. To him who divided the Red Sea in two, for his loving kindness endures forever, and made Israel pass through the midst of it, for his loving kindness endures forever. But he overthrew Pharaoh and his army in the Red Sea, for his loving kindness endures forever. To him who led his people through the wilderness, for his loving kindness endures forever. To him who struck great kings, for his loving kindness endures forever, and killed mighty kings, for his loving kindness endures forever. Sihon, king of the Amorites, for his loving kindness endures forever, and Og, king of Bashan, for his loving kindness endures forever. And gave their land as an inheritance, for his loving kindness endures forever. Even an inheritance to Israel, his servant, for his loving kindness endures forever. Who remembered us in our low estate, for his loving kindness endures forever, and has snatched us from our adversaries, for his loving kindness endures forever. Who gives food to all flesh, for his loving kindness endures forever. Give thanks to the God of heaven, for his loving kindness endures forever. Now, Isaiah 66. Thus says Yahweh, Heaven is my throne, and the earth is the footstool of my feet. Where then is a house you could build for me? And where is a place that I may rest? For my hand made all these things, and thus all these things came into being, declares Yahweh. But to this one I will look, to him who is humble and contrite of spirit, who trembles at my word. But he who slaughters an ox is the one who strikes down a man. He who sacrifices a lamb is the one who breaks a dog's neck. He who offers a grain offering is the one who offers swine's blood. He who offers a memorial offering of frankincense is the one who blesses wickedness. As they have chosen their ways, and their soul takes pleasure in their detestable things, so I will choose their punishments, and will bring on them what they dread. Because I called out, but no one answered. I spoke, but they did not listen. And they did what was evil in my eyes, and chose that in which I did not take pleasure. Hear the word of Yahweh, you who tremble at his word. Your brothers who hate you, who exclude you for my name's sake, have said, Let Yahweh be glorified, that I may see your gladness. But they will be put to shame. A voice of rumbling from the city, a voice from the temple, the voice of Yahweh, who is paying recompense to his enemies. Before she was in labor pains, she gave birth. Before her pangs came, she delivered a male child. Who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such things? Can a land be brought forth through labor pains in one day? Can a nation be born all at once? As soon as Zion was in labor pains, she also gave birth to her sons. Shall I bring to the point of breaking forth and not cause birth, says Yahweh? Or shall I, who cause birth, shut the womb, says your God? Be glad with Jerusalem, and rejoice for her, all who love her. Be exceedingly joyful with her, all you who mourn over her, that you may nurse and be satisfied with her comforting breasts, that you may suck and be delighted with her bountiful bosom. For thus says Yahweh, Behold, I stretch out peace to her like a river, and the glory of the nations like an overflowing stream. And you will be nursed, and you will be carried on the hip, and played with on the knees. As one whom his mother comforts, so I will comfort you. And you will be comforted in Jerusalem. Then you will see this, and your heart will be joyful, and your bones will flourish like the new grass, and the hand of Yahweh will be made known to his slaves, but he will be indignant toward his enemies. For behold, Yahweh will come in fire, and his chariots like the whirlwind, to return his anger with wrath, and to rebuke with flames of fire. For Yahweh will execute judgment by fire, and by his sword on all flesh, and those slain by Yahweh will be many. Those who sanctify and purify themselves to go to the gardens, following one in the center, will eat swine's flesh, detestable things, and mice will come to an end altogether, declares Yahweh. I know their works and their thoughts. The time is coming to gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my glory. I will set a sign among them, and will send those who have escaped from them to the nations, Tarshish and Put and Lud, Meshach, Tubal and Javan, to the distant coastlands that have neither heard my report nor seen my glory. They will declare my glory among the nations. Then they shall bring all your brothers from all the nations as a grain offering to Yahweh, on horses, in chariots, in litters, on mules, and on camels, to my holy mountain, Jerusalem. Says Yahweh, just as the sons of Israel bring their grain offering in a clean vessel to the house of Yahweh. I will also take some of them for priests and for Levites, says Yahweh. For just as the new heavens and the new earth, which I make, will endure before me, declares Yahweh, so your seed and your name will endure. And it shall be from new moon to new moon, and from Sabbath to Sabbath, all mankind will come to worship before me, says Yahweh. Then they will go forth and look on the corpses of the men who have transgressed against me, for their worm will not die, and their fire will not be quenched, and they will be an object of contempt to all mankind. Concluding today in Matthew chapter 14. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard the news about Jesus and said to his servants, "This is John the Baptist, for he has risen from the dead. That is why miraculous powers are at work in him." For when Herod had John arrested, he bound him and put him in a prison because of Herodias, the wife of his brother Philip. For John had been saying to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." And although Herod wanted to put him to death, he feared the crowd because they were regarding John as a prophet. But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before them and pleased Herod, so much so that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. Now, having been prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me here on a platter the head of John the Baptist." Although he was grieved, the king commanded it to be given because of the oaths, or rather because of his oaths, and because of his dinner guests. And he sent and had John beheaded in the prison. And his head was brought on a platter and given to the girl, and she brought it to her mother. And the disciples came, his disciples, John the Baptist's disciples, came and took away the body and buried it. And they went and reported it to Jesus. Now when Jesus heard about John, he withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. When the crowds heard of this, they followed him on foot from the cities. And when he went ashore, he saw a large crowd and felt compassion for them and healed their sick. Now, when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This place is desolate, and the hour is already late, so send the crowds away that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said to them, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." But they said to him, "We have here only 5 loaves and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." And ordering the crowds to sit down on the grass, he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. And looking up toward heaven, he blessed the food, and breaking the loaves, he gave them to the disciples, and they gave them to the people, to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied. They picked up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 full baskets. And there were about 5,000 men who ate, besides the women and children. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, while he sent the crowds away. And after he had sent the crowds away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. And when it was evening, he was there alone. But the boat was already many stadia away from the land, being battered by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. Now, when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, and they said, It is a ghost. And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, Take courage. It is I, do not be afraid. And Peter answered and said to him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. And he said, Come. And getting out of the boat, Peter walked out on the water and came toward Jesus. But seeing the wind, and he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and took hold of him, and said to him, You of little faith, why did you doubt? When they got into the boat, the wind stopped. And those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, You are truly God's Son. When they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret. And when the men of that place recognized him, they sent word into all that surrounding district, and brought to him all who were sick, and were pleading with him that they might just touch the fringe of his garment, and as many as touched it were cured. That's all for today. That's all the text, and that is also all of the notes. God willing, we'll be back tomorrow. Behold, the word of the Lord.